커서스바이오 주식회사의 라히지 샤얀 최고기술 책임자님께서 수고를 해주실 텐데요. 마이크로니들 기반 약물 전달 시스템의 최신 연구동향 및 생산공정이라는 제목으로 함께 해주시겠습니다. 네, 라히지 샤얀 최고기술 책임자님께서는 연세대학교에서 박사학위를 취득하신 뒤에 한양대학교에서 연구조교수를 거쳐서 현재는 커서스바이오 주식회사에서 최고기술 책임자를 맡고 계십니다. 네, 그럼 라이지 샤얀 최고기술 책임자님을 무대 위로 모시겠습니다. 여러분 따뜻한 박수로 환영해 주시길 바랍니다.
Good day. I'm Shayan Lahiji, the CTO of Courses-Bio. Courses-Bio is an institute spin-off company focused on development of microneedle patches. Today, I'll briefly discuss about the recent advances in microneedle-mediated drug delivery systems, and I'll be focusing on the challenges in scaling up. So my presentation is going to cover a brief introduction of microneedle technologies, fabrication technologies, recent advancements, challenges, and conclusion. Microneedles are the physical enhancers of transdermal drug delivery. A microneedle array is usually made of tens to hundreds of micron-scale needles, and they are based on their type, they can encapsulate active compounds and deliver them into the body in a minimal invasive manner. So as you can see here, there are 4 types of microneedles. The solid type, which creates micropores onto the skin, and active compounds are delivered through those micropores into the deeper layers. The coated type, which is similar to the solid type microneedle, but a layer of active compound is coated onto the surface of solid microneedles, and upon application, the coated layer dissolves and delivers the encapsulated materials. The dissolvable type, which to me is the most interesting type, is made of a combination, a mixture of polymer and active compound in the form of microneedles. So upon application onto the skin, the needle itself fully dissolves, and after, let's say, depending on which type of polymer we are using, after a few minutes to few hours or sometimes days, in Korean, but I think English would be much better if you don't mind. But at the end, if you have questions, you can ask in Korean. And I'm trying to speak slowly so you can all follow what I'm saying. So the dissolvable type is made of a mixture of polymer and active compound, and upon application, it will fully dissolve. Hollow type is similar to hypodermic needles. In case of hollow type, the size of needles are much smaller than hypodermic needles, and they can inject the active compounds into the skin. Here we have an image of microneedle patch. As you can see here, these microneedles will be fully dissolved after application. So what makes microneedles so interesting? The first reason is improved patient convenience. There is no administration pain like injection, and it has minimized skin damage. So it would improve the quality of life. Microneedles can be employed as an alternate drug administration route. So instead of parenteral injection or oral administration, we can use microneedles. And there were many studies, many reports suggesting improved effectiveness, improved dose effectiveness when the active compounds are delivered through microneedles. In addition to that, microneedles have shown to be more stable than the solution form. So for example, in case of vaccines that require cold chain, ultra cold chain for transportation, when they are encapsulated within microneedles, they can be stored at higher temperatures, like refrigerators. And the other reason that makes microneedle advantageous compared to other platforms is depending on what type of microneedle we are using and which country we are applying the FDA, microneedles can bypass the initial preclinical and clinical studies. So in that case, if we are using a drug that is already FDA approved within microneedles, then we can skip some of the earliest stages of clinical trials, and with less investment and time, we will be able to commercialize microneedles. So here is a brief history of microneedles. The earliest concept of microneedles were introduced in 1950s. Later in 1998, we had one of the first reports related to microfabrication technologies that can be used to fabricate microneedles. And later, since then, there are many research centers, companies that are developing microneedles. And at global scale, we have got Corium, Nanopass, Microdermics, Vaxxes, 3M, BD, and Micron that are focused on development of microneedles. They develop solid microneedles, hollow microneedles, and some of them also dissolving type microneedles. In Korea, we have got Cod Medicine, Dermaject, Rapas, and so on. The microneedle market is expected to grow up to $9.4 billion by 2030. And regarding the regulations, it's already mentioned during the previous conferences, so I just briefly go over it. In US, according to FDA, combination products are divided in 3 different categories of single entity, co-packaged, or cross-labeled. Each of these categories are different from each other. For example, in case of single entity, it's just like pre-filled syringes that was previously introduced. Co-packaged type is referred to that type of combination products that are packaged together, but they're separate. Cross-labeled, the products are sold separately, but they are used together as a single product. So in Korea, the regulations for microneedles are a little bit different from US. The solid type and coated type microneedles that I earlier introduced are categorized under combination products. But in case of dissolving microneedles, they are categorized under drug or biological products, which makes it more difficult to apply for FDA. In US, we would be able to proceed the FDA for dissolving microneedles much faster if the drug is already FDA approved. But in Korea, even if the drug is already FDA approved, we should go through all preclinical and clinical trial steps again. And in US, there are many clinical trials at the moment going on. Also, there are companies, as you can see here, the list of companies producing microneedles for vaccine delivery. They use dissolving type, hollow type, and also the solid type for COVID-19, influenza vaccine, and so on. And there are also microneedle products already in the market, but they're usually solid type and hollow type microneedles produced by 3M and some other companies. There are different fabrication methods to fabricate microneedles. The most widely used fabrication method is called micromolding technique, which we have a microneedle master mold, usually fabricated by micromilling technologies. And through that master mold, we create a silicone negative mold. And we pour polymer and active compound onto that silicone negative mold to fabricate dissolving microneedles. So the process is very simple, and most of the microneedle manufacturers are using this technology to fabricate microneedles. And how they pour the polymers onto the silicone mold is different based on each company or research institute. The Korean company, Rapas, is using a droplet-borne air-blowing technique. This is also a very unique and interesting microneedle fabrication method. And in this method, the polymers are dispensed over a patch, and there is another layer that comes down and contacts the polymers, and then it is drawn upwards. In that case, we have got 2 layers of microneedles fabricated on the both sides of the layers. Recently, we have got 3D printing technologies applied onto the microneedles field. So since 2019, we are seeing reports related to application of 3D printing technologies in microneedles. And in light of that, we are able to design microneedles that we could not think of. It was impossible to develop previously. And the microneedles that we are also currently developing is among those geometries that I will get into it in my later slides. So here is an example of 3D printing accuracy, how precise 3D printing is getting. So as you can see here, we have got a castle fabricated on the tip of a pencil. This is the result. This is the tip of a pencil, and as we zoom in, you can see the castle fabricated on the tip of a pencil. And this is a nanoscale fabrication, 3D printing. So the earlier photos, this video that I was showing, shows layer by layer fabrication of this castle. So these days, these kind of 3D printers are being produced, and institutes can easily purchase a device and apply it in their research. This is another example of nano and micro fabrication. As you can see, different structures with very smooth surface, they can be fabricated using 3D printers. And previously, we had filament-based 3D printers that had very low resolution. But as you can see here, the printing quality is highly precise, and so we utilize this technology to fabricate the master mold of microneedles. So there are a few challenges in designing and developing microneedle platforms. The first and main one is the challenges related to FDA, acquiring FDA approvals. Because, as I mentioned earlier, for solid type and coated type microneedles, they are categorized under combination product in Korea. So proceeding with FDA is not that difficult with those type of microneedles, but when we get into dissolving microneedles that has much higher potential in drug delivery, we should go through all the process of clinical trials. And the other factor is related to microneedle fabrication. So how much we can encapsulate within microneedles. The capacity of microneedles are limited. So how can we, within this very tiny, very micro dimension geometry, how can we encapsulate the maximum volume of active compounds. And that's the other factor. The third factor would be the insertion of microneedles into the skin. Previously developed microneedles, as you can see here, they are usually fabricated in a conical shape or pyramid shape and some similar geometries. And upon insertion to the skin, they may not fully insert into the skin, or they may require an applicator to be inserted into the skin. So how can we ensure that microneedles are fully inserted into the skin? That's also another factor to be considered while developing microneedles. And the third factor would be mass production. If the microneedle that we are developing is too complex or requires multi-step fabrication technique to mass produce, it's not suitable for mass production. So the technique that we are using for mass production should be also very simple and capable of mass producing with low cost. And there are also the other issues that are not that important to mention at this presentation. So this is a publication published in December last year, comparing the geometries of previously developed microneedles, the cone-shaped microneedles, with a new geometry that we call MicroLock. And this MicroLock was designed in a way that upon insertion into the skin, as the lower parts of it gets smaller, it interlocks within the tissue. So it won't distend after application. So once it's inserted into the skin, it fully dissolves, and then we can remove the patch. But previous microneedles, upon insertion, if we move or if we we have dynamic skin, then they would easily detach. And in that case, we cannot achieve a precise drug delivery. So as you can see here, this is a comparison of conventional cone-shaped microneedles with MicroLock. From top, they may look similar, but once they are inserted into the skin, you can see we have a much higher insertion and permeation efficacy compared to the conventional types. And here we have got an experiment of bending the skin to evaluate how well microneedles are attached onto the skin. As you can see here, the conventional type microneedles, upon 30 degrees bending or 60 degrees bending, would detach from the skin. But in case of MicroLock, they were fully attached and could fully dissolve within the skin. So this is a very simple example of how the geometry of microneedle can impact its delivery accuracy. And to fabricate these microneedles, we are using a micro-molding technology that I previously mentioned. So first, we are using 3D printers, micro-scale, micro-resolution 3D printers to fabricate the master mold of microneedles. Then we fabricate the PDMS, the silicon negative mold. Using this negative mold, we fabricate dissolving microneedles by pouring the active compound and polymer encapsulated mixture on the negative mold, and then we use centrifuge to fill the molds, and then we remove them using a hydrocolloid patch. And this technology is already at mass production scale. And here you can see an example of dissolving microneedle patch. The other factor related to microneedles is that when we are using micromolding method, the drugs, just imagine the blue color as our active compound. Usually, the mass production facilities, they are using the blue as, just imagine the blue as an active compound. They mix drug and polymer together, and they fabricate patches like this. So we have got a large volume of active compound in the base layer. The base layer of microneedle doesn't penetrate the skin. So even if we have got a drug encapsulated within this lower part, it cannot be delivered into the skin, and we cannot achieve precise delivery. So to solve this issue, we developed another technology that we can precisely encapsulate active compounds within the tip section of microneedles, as you can see here. In that case, we can accurately encapsulate active compounds within microneedles and deliver them into the skin. And here is an overview of the potential of microneedles in the field. Currently, we are seeing a lot of products in the market, in drugstores, a lot of cosmetic microneedles in the market. However, I'm expecting soon to be able to see drugs and vaccines that are encapsulated within microneedles. And for conclusion, I would like to mention two facts. The first one, for production of microneedles, it's very important to ensure that we can accurately encapsulate our active compounds within microneedles, and we can accurately deliver them into the skin. So they both are very important factors in development of microneedles. And the other factor is whether we can mass produce them. So if the production requires a multi-step complex procedure, then we won't be able to mass produce these microneedles. So these are two factors that, in my idea, are very important during the development of microneedles. The other factor related to microneedles in Korea, as I mentioned earlier, the FDA still requires, we need a more detailed regulations related to dissolving microneedles. And recently, there was a Korean Society of Convergent Research on Microneedle Systems that was established, I think, a few weeks ago. And many microneedle producing companies and research labs joined this society. And we hope to be able to facilitate the regulations of KFDA to be able to market dissolving microneedles as soon as possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your presentation. 네, 발표 감사드립니다. 이렇게 해서 마지막 발표까지 함께 해봤습니다. 마이크로니들 기반 약물 전달 시스템의 최신 연구 동향 및 생산 공정이라는 주제로 함께 했는데요. 갑자기 영어로 강연을 해서 약간 놀라신 분들도 계셨을 것 같은데 간단하게 좀 말씀을 드리자면 이제 다양한 타입의 마이크로니들을 좀 소개를 해주셨어요. 근데 또 우리나라와 FDA의 기준이 조금 다르기 때문에 타입별로 적용되는 법이 또 상이하고 또 이제 그로 인해서 겪을 수 있는 어려움도 저희가 확인할 수 있었던 그런 시간인 것 같습니다. 굉장히 또 영상을 보면서도 또 놀랐던 게 굉장히 세세한 섬세한 기술이 필요한 그런 작업이기 때문에 더욱더 높은 발전 가능성을 내포할 수 있었다라고 확인할 수 있었고요. 다시 한번 이제 강연 함께 해주신 최고 책임자 기술 책임자님께 다시 한번 감사드리겠습니다.